Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments, honest every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. They set 2 white ribboned folding chairs in the front row, and no one sat in them. The pastor's voice rose and thinned in the wind off Cedar Hollow, while the walnut casket slid down on new straps, the earth raw and red as a skinned knee. Lila's hand found mine and clung small and damp, the way a child grips the rail of a ferry. I kept my eyes on those empty chairs, as if staring hard enough could summon my son and his wife into shape and duty. Ashford was out in forced school secretaries with casseroles waiting at home choir ladies in weathered heels, boys from the robotics club shifting from foot to foot in borrowed jackets. Aiden would have teased them for the ties. Grandma Lila whispered, the sound thin under the pastor's prayers. When are Mom and Dad coming? The lie rose before the truth had a chance. I'm not sure, honey. My voice felt like a thread pulled too tight. The white chairs shone bald as bones. Ashford is the kind of town that remembers birthdays and bad harvests. At Maple Diner, they top off your coffee without asking. On Sundays, you can set your watch by the church bells. 6 years ago, Nathan and Amber left 2 kids on my stoop with a suitcase and a note about needing time to get back on their feet. People here still bring that night up when they need to explain why Lila calls me Grandma the way other kids say Mom. Walter, my husband, had seen it coming even before that, the way Nathan dodged work, the way Amber ran hot for a week and vanished the next. He built 2 trusts for the kids and a little steel-mouthed plan he never called a plan. He kept the papers in his desk in the study where the afternoon light is the color of tea. Dust to dust, the pastor said. A robin hopped reckless across the clipped grass as if grief were just weather. Noah Kim, Aiden's best friend, came forward last when the row of neighbors had thinned. The boy's eyes were bright and stubbornly dry. He didn't think Noah said mouth tight. Jay went under, and Aiden, he just moved, like he couldn't finish. I touched his sleeve and nodded because, yes, that was my boy, the first to stand, the last to boast. Noah's mother, Mrs. Kim, pressed a folded note into my hand. Church ladies always have notes, then drew Noah against her shoulder. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket as they turned away. I waited until Lila's attention drifted to the spray of lilies, until her fingers walked the ribbon loops. Amber's name filled the screen. Stop being theatrical, the text read. We need bank statements for Aiden's account for our lawyer. Send them today. I stared at the gray speech bubble until my own face floated faintly in the glass. Another text arrived before I could put the phone away. Also, we're taking Lila tomorrow. She needs her parents. You're in no condition to care for her. The raw dirt, the white chairs, the wind that smelled like lake water and cut grass, it all tipped for a second. I tightened my grip on Lila's hand until she looked up at me. We're going home, I told her, the words as practical as a grocery list. People will be dropping food by. She nodded with ceremony, a brave little mayor. On the way to the car, she paused to touch the temporary placard with Aiden's name, her thumb smudging the fresh black marker, someone Noah likely had written underneath. He didn't hesitate. We drove the back streets where the maples hold their shade like a secret. Ashford flickered by the barber pole, still spinning at Hank's the plywood sign, urging prayer for the varsity, the used bookstore with a cat asleep in the front window. Lila kept both hands on Aiden's hoodie in her lap, rubbing the stitched R of his school like it could rub back. The text icon kept blooming on my phone in the cup holder. I didn't look. The casseroles began before we made it to the porch. Mrs. Henderson had stacked foil pans like bricks against the rail, each one labeled in careful pen, chicken divan, baked ziti ham and potato. Lila wrestled the storm door handle and let it clap behind us, because it always claps. The house smelled like lemon oil and laundry. Aiden's sneakers were still by the bench, one lace looped through the other like those old tricks he'd teach Lila at the kitchen table. I set my purse on the console where the mail goes and slipped my phone face down on top. Coat, I said gently. Lila hung her black cardigan on the hook under her name and stood for a second looking at the blue wall where Aiden had taped space posters for her, a swirl of stars, a pale ringed planet. Can I? She began, then stopped. Never mind. What is it? Can I stay here? She didn't look at me, even if Mom texts me. The truth rose before the lie had a chance. Of course. I smoothed a wrinkle from her sleeve. Let's get you something to eat. We made plates, because that's what you do after funerals. Here you eat the food people carry on their grief, like shoulder bags. I watched Lila choose carrot sticks, and half a roll watched her move them around her plate more than she chewed. When she was done not eating, I sent her to brush her teeth because order is a mercy you can hand to a child. Walter's study has a door that clicks in a way only we ever noticed. I eased it shut behind me and stood in the dusty square of light on the rug. His leather chair still kept his shape. The shelves were the same patient rows, paperbacks he'd marked in pencil binders with tax years on their spines, a jar of screws he'd never labeled. On the desk, the brass key gleamed where he'd left it, as if he'd only stepped into the yard to check the mailbox, as if any minute he'd holler, "Elle, bring me that file, will you?" The bottom drawer stuck a little, as always. The smell that came up when it opened was glue and old envelopes and the clean paper smell of a teacher's lounge. The folders sat where I remembered them, names in Walter's block letters. Aidan Reed, Trust. Lila Reed, Trust. And tucked behind a thinner file with one word that had never felt dramatic until today. Contingency. My hand hovered and withdrew. Some doors you open only once. In the hall, the bathroom fan hummed. In the kitchen, the refrigerator cycled on Workaday's breath. I put the drawer back all the way in and turned the key until the lock settled. In the mirror above the desk, I caught the small, tired shape of my mouth and the squint of a woman who has watched storms roll across fields and knows the math of board-by-board repairs. On the console table outside the study, my phone buzzed again, insistent a wasp against glass. I let it. There is such a thing as choosing silence, Teeth Lila announced from the doorway, barefooted, now face clean and solemn. Let me see. I peered, exaggerated it the way we used to, until she smiled a little and swatted me away. In her room, the ceiling glowed faintly with the stars Aidan had painted for her last winter. He'd sent me to Walmart twice when he miscounted, then stood on a chair tongue caught in the corner of his mouth to string a Milky Way above her bed. Lila crawled under her quilt without being asked and folded the hoodie by her pillow the way some kids tuck Bibles. I switched on the nightlight shaped like a rocket. It threw a pale blue cone across the carpet. "I'll be right down the hall," I said. I know, she was brave again, the little mayor. Good night. Downstairs, I moved the foil back on a casserole and took one bite cold from the corner. Ham and potato, Mrs. Henderson's handwriting right. I wrote her a thank you on a sticky note because if I didn't write it now, it would itch in my mind all night. The porch light I left on. The white chairs at the cemetery were probably folded by now and slid into a closet out of sight. I washed my fork and set it to dry. The house held itself together, the fan hum, the clock tick. The hush that comes when a door is shut and people you love are sleeping. I picked up my phone and silenced the thread with Amber's name. Then I took Walter's brass key from my pocket and set it on the desk where I wouldn't forget where it was. I sat at the kitchen table long enough for the porch light to hiss warm against the bugs and go quiet again. The house had settled into its usual night music, the hallway clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the baseboard heat, and the sound of Lila shifting once and then going still. Walter's brass key lay on the edge of the desk, like a question I'd been taught to answer. I picked it up before doubt could climb back in. The study door gave its old soft click. In the lamplight, the room looked as it always had. Paper squared pencils, points up in the jar, a legal pad with Walter's tidy columns, and a grocery item half started in the margin sugar, because he could never remember whether we had any. The bottom drawer stuck yielded, and the smell of paper and glue and winter closets rose to meet me. I slid the folders forward, my fingers steady until they weren't. Aidan Reed Trust. Lila Reed Trust. Contingency. Walter's block letters have always made me feel safe like street signs. Inside the contingency file, I found what he meant me to find, a letter in his hand. The ink slightly faded, the edges squared by careful cutting, and behind it a copy of the trust document with tabs at the places that mattered. Elle, if you're opening this, it means the thing we prayed around has taken shape. I don't write this to frighten you, only to say what I know about you. You've wrestled harder things in smaller rooms. You are and always have been the backstop of this family. I've worked with Klein to build in discretion. If a beneficiary dies before reaching the age we set, the trustee controls the disposition of funds consistent with the beneficiary's expressed wishes or best interests. It's in Section 14C, tabbed. You'll find Samuel Klein's card with his home number. He agreed to advise you personally if I'm not around to stand next to you. I've also kept notes of Nathan and Amber's lapses with dates, not to shame but to document. If you need them, they're behind this letter. The signature had the same little flourish I pressed onto napkins the year we learned cursive side by side at the kitchen table, two kids with cheap pens and pride. I read the paragraph again. I pressed my thumb to the tab at Section 14C like you'd test a fence for charge. The language was clean, not a lawyer's maze, but a corridor with doors you could open. A card slid from the back of the file when I lifted it. Klein and Hart, Samuel R. Klein, counselor at law. The paper thick as old money. Under the office number, he had written a home line, and beneath that a note in Walter's hand, he'll answer. I don't call people at night unless something is broken or bleeding. Still, my finger found the numbers and my ear found the ring. It had barely finished a second cycle when a voice answered steady as a metronome. "Klein, Mr. Klein. This is Eleanor Brooks, Walter's wife." A breath caught somewhere between us that wasn't mine. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, and I heard the shift from business to human. "I'm sorry. I read about Aiden. I was hoping there had been some mistake." "There wasn't," I said. I kept my voice level because if I let it tilt, it would slide away. "I'm calling because Nathan and Amber have already—" I stopped at the edge of naming it. "They texted during the service. They want bank statements for Aiden's trust. They said they're taking Lila tomorrow." Tonight he was all steel now. "Have they been to the house?" "Not yet." "Do you have a temporary guardianship in place?" "Yes. Walter and I had signed that piece 3 summers back when the air was thick and the peaches were good." "Good. If they attempt to remove Lila without a court order, you call the police. I'll be there in the morning by 8:15. We'll file what needs filing and respond to any emergency petition. I received a notice earlier opposing counsel as one Tara Lowell. She submitted an ex parte request regarding custody and access to the trust. It hasn't been heard." "Thank you. Have you kept records? Dates, missed visits, support?" "I have a calendar that would make a nun proud." He exhaled in the way a man does when a crucial beam is sound. "All right. We'll talk through next steps when I arrive. Try to rest, Mrs. Brooks." We said goodnight like 2 people hanging up on a storm. I locked the drawer, left the letter where I could find it again, and stepped back into the kitchen. The phone lit in my hand, not with a text, but with a voicemail I must have missed while persuading Lila to brush her teeth. The timestamp read 2:07 a.m., not tonight, but the night before. Amber's voice swam up through crowd noise, the watery thrum of a bar TV calling a game coins chiming like cheap applause. "Ellie, pick up. This is stupid. You know what we need. We'll talk tomorrow. Don't do anything dramatic." The sound made me stand very still, like the floorboards had changed beneath me. I saved the message and opened the Ring camera app out of habit. 2 packages and a cat had tripped the sensor today. Nothing else. The porch light lured a moth into the lens, a white blur beating its heart out against glass. I slept some, or maybe I just closed my eyes while the night moved past me. At 6, habit carried me to the kettle and the coffee maker and the radio I couldn't turn on because I wasn't ready for other people's voices. Lila patted in with her hair in its sleep tangle, and her feet bare climbed on a chair and watched the toaster the way kids watch fireworks. "You can have the corner piece," she said solemnly when I cut the toast, "because corners are the best." "Deal." She ate half a strawberry and the crust off one triangle. She carried Aiden's hoodie from room to room like a standard. At 7:30, I dialed the school and told the secretary, who's been there since before I taught my first class, that Lila would be with me today. The woman's voice softened in the way secretaries in towns like ours keep people from flying apart. "Take what you need, Ellie. I'll tell her teacher." The doorbell rang at 8:10 earlier than men who wear ties usually operate. I knew whose shape would be behind the frosted glass from the stance, the angle of the head, the way expectation sets shoulders. Nathan had always believed doors should greet him like applause. I opened it enough to be polite. He'd put on a button-down I'd never seen, and he'd shaved the untidy beard that made him look perpetually one apology late. Amber stood half a step behind him in a cream dress and a cardigan that still had the crease from a store bag. She had the bright eyes people wear when they've coached themselves in a bathroom mirror. The perfume hit before the smile. "Mom," Nathan said, leaning in as if we were still on the right side of our old words. "We came for Lila." "Visitation is on Sundays," I said, "because starting with the truth is a kindness even when it isn't received as such." "We're her parents," Amber said lightly, as if reminding me of the color of the sky. "We don't need an appointment to see our daughter." "Seeing isn't the same as taking," I said. Nathan looked past me into the hall, into the soft blue of the wall where Lila's name hung on a hook. "We've enrolled her in Whitfield Elementary. She'll have a smaller class. It's better for her. Less reminders." He chose his words like stepping stones, careful not to splash himself. "Whitfield is 27 minutes from the address on your last paperwork," I said. "That's a long bus ride for a first grader." Amber's smile sharpened. "We moved. We'll send you the lease." I held the door because doors are firm by nature, but can be made to feel soft. "Lila is upstairs. She ate breakfast. She's not going anywhere today." "Mom," Nathan said, the old boy sound in the word nastier for being familiar. "Be reasonable." A soft weight touched the back of my knees. Lila had padded in without my hearing her, the hoodie folded in her arms like a loaf of bread. She took in the scene, the doorway, the posture, her father's smile, and stood straighter. "I live here," she said. Not loud, not defiant, just as if she were stating her address for a field trip tag. "My room is here." Amber's jaw flexed once the way it does when a drink goes down wrong. "Sweetheart, transitions are scary, but you'll love the new place." "What color did you paint my room?" Lila asked. "Because I don't like pink anymore." "Blue," Amber said quickly, landing on the word like a cat on the nearest safe surface. We did blue, with stars, like your ceiling. You don't know how many stars there are, Lila said softly, and pressed her mouth to the hoodie sleeve. Behind Nathan, a familiar dark sedan pulled up to the curb. A man stepped out with a leather briefcase, his tie knotted like he'd been born with it, his hair silver at the temples and combed without vanity. He looked from the house numbers to my face, and then past me, measuring the moment like a carpenter measures a frame. Mrs. Brooks, he said easily, Samuel Klein. Nathan's expression went quick and tight. You brought a lawyer to your own house? Mr. Klein brought himself, I said. Samuel introduced himself to Nathan and Amber with a politeness that had no wobble. I'm here to clarify the existing guardianship and to discourage anyone from making choices they will regret in front of a judge. May we step inside? I didn't move until they did. In the living room, the morning light fell across the family photographs in a way that made an accidental exhibit. There were school pictures and Halloween costumes and 3 snapshots from the maple tapping festival paper cups of amber syrup balanced on mittened hands. In each frame, the children were anchored to someone. Sometimes that someone was me. Sometimes it was Walter. It was almost never Nathan or Amber. Samuel set his briefcase on the coffee table and withdrew the documents with a rhythm that calmed the room. Here, he said, laying out the temporary guardianship we had signed and the acknowledgments Nathan and Amber had initialed. This agreement provides that Mrs. Brooks is Lila's custodian until further order of the court. Any attempt to remove her without such order would constitute a violation of the statute regarding interference with custody. In plain language, if you take her today, I will advise Mrs. Brooks to call the police, and they will have grounds to act. Amber laughed, but it was the tinny laugh a person uses when a waiter spills water. You're threatening us. I'm telling you the law, Samuel said not unkindly. You're free to arrange contact as specified Sundays, supervised as needed, or to petition for change through proper channels. Nathan looked around as if the walls might weigh in. His eyes landed on Aiden's sneakers by the bench. The laces looped through each other, the boy's trick arrested mid-step. He swallowed.
We're grieving he tried.
So is everyone in this house, I said. Amber bent to Lila with that quick shine in her eyes that photographs well. We brought you a new backpack, she said. It's in the car. It has unicorns. I don't like unicorns, Lila said. I like rockets. Nathan's hands opened and closed the old tell. We'll come back with a deputy, he said, half to Samuel, half to himself. You're welcome to come back with a court order, Samuel replied. I suggest you call your counsel and coordinate. It saves everyone time. The words hung in the space where other families put comfortable silence. I heard my own voice say, because my mouth knows how to host even when my heart has other chores, there's coffee if you want it. Nobody did. They went out together the way they came, in a 2-person front that had learned how to look unified at a distance. At the threshold, Lila's voice followed them softly, more observation than plea. Please don't take my stuff. No one answered. The door shut. The air adjusted. Samuel did not look pleased with himself or with anyone. He closed his briefcase with the same deliberate care he'd opened it. I'll set up at the dining table, he said, including me in the sentence, the way a good teacher includes a student. We'll need copies of the guardianship, any records you keep. Attendance, medical, financial. Phone logs if you have them. Emails. I'll scan and label here so nothing leaves the house. I have a calendar, I said, and a folder. I went to get them. My hands knew which drawer, which shelf. In the kitchen, I poured 2 mugs of coffee and added a 3rd glass of milk with the bendy straw that Lila prefers. I set the milk on the table beside her and the cup warmed her fingers. She pretended not to watch Samuel's hands work. The doorbell rang again, a bright sound in the tired house. I checked the camera before I checked the glass. Mrs. Henderson on the porch, another foil pan balanced on her palm, her mouth already forming the apology people make when they bring food into grief. I opened for her, and she stood haloed by the cold morning breath caught in white puffs. I didn't know if anyone had dropped off breakfast, she said. It's French toast bake. You can warm it or not. Thank you, I said, because you say it when you can. Come in out of the cold. She stepped past me, and her eyes went at once to Lila, who gave her a small wave, then to the table where Samuel's scanner light ran like a quiet river over one of Walter's underlines. Mrs. Henderson put the pan down with a careful clink, patted my arm once, and found her way back to the door without asking questions, which is an art. When she'd gone, Lila slid off her chair and carried Aiden's hoodie to the couch. She sat with it in her lap, smoothing the sleeve in slow stripes the way you calm a dog. Samuel's machine hummed page after page, while the house did the only thing a house can do, hold. By late morning, the dining table had turned into a clerk's counter. Samuel's scanner purred. The green bar moved like a slow river over calendars. Immunization records, permission slips with my signature, where other lines were blank. He labeled files with a teacher's exactness. Brooks Guardianship 2019, read Aiden attendance, read Lila med auth, and stacked the copies in clean towers. The door thunked twice, paper against wood. I opened it to the weekend edition of the Ashford Gazette, folded so the side column faced up. A headline the size of a church sign ran the length: "Family fight erupts over teens' trust after lake tragedy." Under it, a photograph from last year's robotics fair showed Aiden grinning beside his team's plywood bridge. The text made a thicket of things that had been simple when said out loud in my kitchen sources close to the parents' long-standing interference funds intended for next of kin. My name appeared once: grandmother guardian, as if hyphenated could pin a person to a wall. I read it standing in the doorway because the air was better there. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson watered her porch ferns with the tender aim she gives living things. She tipped the watering can when she saw me, a little salute that understood too much. Samuel finished. A page glanced up and held his hand out for the paper. He read quickly as if the words were measurements and he was checking a cut. "They've chosen their stage," he said mildly, and set the Gazette under the stack of exhibits like one more thing to label later. Lila climbed onto my hip to see the photo and traced Aiden's face with a reverent finger. "They used the one where his hair is weird," she said. "Then because she was 7 and fairness is a ledger, they should ask permission." At noon, the bell rang again. Not the brisk tap of a neighbor, but a fist with a key in it, 3 sharp knocks that rattled the brass plate. I checked the camera out of habit. Ben stood on the porch in his airport clothes, dark jeans, windbreaker, a backpack slung over one shoulder, and a rolling suitcase at his knee. His hair had gone saltier since Christmas. The laugh lines at his eyes had deepened into something steadier. He looked like the boy Walter taught to use a level, and the man who'd turned that into a life. "Hey, Elle," he said when I opened the door, and then he looked past me in the instinctive way of someone counting the shapes of a room before he steps into it. His mouth softened when he spotted Lila. "Peanut." Lila launched off my hip and hit him like a small meteor. He staggered on purpose, set his suitcase upright, and scooped her under the arms with a practiced woof. The hoodie between them made a blue bundle. "Should I spin you?" he asked. "Or are we too dignified for spins now?" "We are dignified," she said, solemn as a judge. "But you can spin one time." He gave her one gravity-ignoring turn and set her down carefully so her socks found the rug right side up. His eyes came back to mine, and for a moment the house held 2 kinds of quiet: what grief does and what love refuses to let it do alone. "I came as soon as I could get a seat," he said. "If it's a bad time, I can—" "It's the right time," I said, because it was. I took his suitcase. He shook Samuel's hand like men do when they decide to be useful. "We've met Samuel," said. "Ashford makes most introductions redundant." "Glad you're here, Ben. I'm building a clean record. We'll need family witnesses as well. I can tell you plenty about Nathan," Ben said, and did not spit the name, which somehow said more than if he had. He turned to Lila. "Where do you need me, boss?" She pointed at the dining table, throne-like. "There." We gave him a seat and a mug, and the worst job sifting screenshots. He took it like a man used to blueprints, ruler straight eye on the corner. Lila hovered at his elbow, offering a running commentary on which photos were good because Aiden made that face, and which needed deleting because it showed her weird tooth. At 2 o'clock, a small crowd collected at the foot of the porch steps. Noah Kim with his ball cap in his hands, Mrs. Kim with a pastry box, and a boy smaller by a head who clung to his mother's coat hem and kept glancing toward the street like he expected the lake itself to roll past. "Come in," I said, and I meant it beyond manners. Mrs. Kim pressed the pastry box into my hands, then cupped my elbow. "It's nothing," she said softly, "but it's something." Noah didn't sit until Lila invited him with a pat to the couch cushion. He perched knees together the way boys do when their bodies grew faster than their certainty. He cleared his throat. I brought Aiden's folder. He had me back up his videos to my drive because he said cloud is just someone else's computer and you should always have 2 copies. He flushed. He was kind of intense about redundancy. "That's a compliment where I live," Samuel said, and set his laptop between them. Noah unlocked the folder, hands steady, once the work began. File names lined the screen with Aiden's exactitude: CHM, Lab, 21, MP4, Robot Arm, Test. Mauve, Cedar, Hollow J, 04. Noah clicked the last one and set the computer so we could all see. The image jolted, as if the camera were passed from one set of wet hands to another. The picture steadied on Aiden's face hair, flattened eyes bright with oxygen and adrenaline. His smile flashed when he saw he was framed. "Documentation," he said, and shoved his bangs off his forehead. "Because Ms. Alvarez says if it isn't documented, it didn't happen, and Ellie is going to ask 1,000 questions. He turned the camera toward the water where Jay sat on the gravel, spitting lake out of his mouth like it was a prank. "Jay Kim, reluctant mere person," Aiden narrated. "He is fine. We are at the buoys. No panic necessary. I repeat, no panic necessary." He aimed the lens back at himself. "Ellie, if you see this later, I swear we stayed inside the markers. Don't freak. We're heading to first aid so they can do that pulse ox thing and yell at us in an educational fashion." He grinned, then smaller, as if some private thought had turned the lake behind his eyes. "Love you," he said simply into the camera, and Noah's hand must have wobbled because the picture tipped. The shoreline became sky, and then someone's shoe filled the frame. The file ended there clean without the second sprint that did not return. No one talked for a full breath. Samuel set his pen down rather than grip it. Lila climbed closer to the screen until her nose almost touched it, as if she might find more image by proximity. "He asked for the pulse ox," Jay mumbled into his mother's coat like confession. "He said that number matters." "It does," I said, because Aiden's voice had made it so. Noah fumbled in his hoodie pocket and brought out a second drive. He also had this other stuff. Notes he recorded to himself for like ideas. He looked at Lila. He did the robot voice when he was practicing, but for the record he used his normal one. Lila swallowed a laugh, and then didn't. Noah queued up an audio file labeled with Aiden's usual blend of modesty and ambition, River Sensor Scholarship Note, M4A. Aiden's voice filled the room without his body calmer than in the video, the kind of cadence he used when he was building something that needed both hands and all his patience. "Okay," he said. And there was the little tap of a pencil at the start. "Future me don't do the giant bridge for senior project if you don't get a truck. The water sensors are smarter. We could use dissolved oxygen probes and a microcontroller cheap. Mrs. Diaz says the trust can cover college, which is wild, so I want to put part toward a scholarship to get other kids into river science. Name ideas. Riverbots is probably dumb. Ellie will tell me a better one. Also, I promised Lila I'd teach her to swim the long way this summer. Put that in writing." The file clicked off. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the kind of space that lets people put things down without breaking them. I had to grip the back of a chair with both hands, not so I wouldn't fall, but because standing still felt like the only right thing. "Can we save those?" Samuel asked at last, voice even. "We'll need a copy for the file and to authenticate the metadata." "I brought the originals," Noah said, relieved to be back on task. "I printed the text history too. The parts about plans and stupid memes. I can strike the memes. They're not helpful." "We'll take it all," Samuel said. "We can sort later." He slid the drives into labeled envelopes and sealed the seams with his thumbnail. "Thank you," he added. "Not the performance kind, but the kind that acknowledges a thing offered costs something to give." Mrs. Kim set her palm between Noah's shoulders, anchoring him without pinning. "He was always at our table," she said. "He never forgot to rinse his dishes. I feel that matters even if it does not matter." "It matters," I said. In the middle of us trying not to drown in our own living room, Lila tugged at the drawer of the sideboard and wrestled out her old tablet, the one with the cracked corner and the unicorn sticker half peeled. "He used this sometimes because my recording app is easier," she announced. She swiped with the authority of a surgeon and found a folder labeled Lila Stars. Inside a file with a rocket icon glowed. She pressed it. Aiden's voice again, this time with that leashed excitement teachers use to keep a class from detonating. "Lila test for bedtime story. Imagine a satellite the size of a loaf of bread floating over Ohio. It's collecting data about the water we swim in. If we could build one for the river, we could see when the fish can't breathe and fix it before anyone gets sick. I think we could do that little sensors a buoy wireless to the high school server. You can help me with the painting part because you know stars better." "I do," Lila said softly to the air. She set the tablet down with two hands like it might shatter. Samuel made notes on his legal pad in his tidy print expressed intent: funds for college, scholarship, water safety. He made a separate column for what the county would call continuity of care years in the same school, the pediatrician, the dentist. He never once used the phrase that rattled like a pan lid in my own chest. He didn't need to. At 3:15, the landline rang with the hollow richness of an instrument made before everything was compressed. "I picked it up because you answer old phones. Brooks residence. Mrs. Brooks." The voice identified itself as Carla from County Child Support Enforcement, the kind of voice that has learned how to be precise without being cruel. Mr. Klein requested copies of enforcement actions related to Nathan Brooks and Amber Hayes. I have 2 instances of non-compliance from the last 6 years, one wage withholding attempt from 2020 that failed due to employer change, and a closed case marked insufficient contact. I can fax certified copies to council. "Please," I said, and read off Samuel's number. She asked me to confirm addresses. I did without looking. She thanked me as if I had done her a favor. When I hung up, Samuel nodded. A corner of a structure slid into place. The doorbell chimed again. I checked the camera and nearly put my hand flat against the glass, the way mothers do when they aren't sure if they'll open. Amber alone this time stood on the porch with sunglasses too large for the day and a paper bag in her hand. The bag made a neat rectangle, the kind catered lunches come in when the person who ordered them didn't ask for a receipt. I opened the inner door and left the storm door latched. Amber lifted the bag so the bottom flashed white. "This is stupid," she said. The town had been under her skin tighter than usual. The vowels had more Ohio and less television. "I don't want this being a circus. Nathan doesn't either." "You called the paper," I said, because the reporter had quoted sources close to the parents using lines I recognized. "I called my mother." She snapped too fast. Then she blinked and smiled like switching radio stations mid-song. "Doesn't matter. Here's the thing. We make this go away." She waggled the bag. "You help us with a piece and we help you with peace. 200 gets you quiet." I didn't reach for the handle. Behind me, I knew Samuel could hear every syllable through the open archway. I didn't need a lawyer to translate the attempt. I didn't need a judge to tell me what word lived under it. "It's a bribe if you say it to a lawyer," Amber added quickly as if she could hear my thought. "Let's just call it family help." Lila's footsteps sounded on the hardwood. Amber glanced past me and flourished the smile she saves for pictures. "Sweetheart," she said and nearly cooed. "Look what Mommy brought. A treat." Lila stayed 2 steps back. "I don't take treats," she said, reciting a rule she'd heard her whole life. "I take dinner." Samuel appeared at my shoulder, then not dramatic. Simply present the way a beam appears when you strip back a wall. "Ms. Hayes," he said evenly, "you're welcome to communicate through counsel. Please don't return without calling." Amber's mouth pinched. Then she lifted the bag again as if its weight could sway gravity. "You're making this ugly," she told me. "We didn't have to do it this way." "I didn't," I said, and closed the inner door with the care I save for bone china. The paper bag sat on the porch railing a full minute after she left, square and stubborn against the wind. I watched it through the curtain until the neighbor kid from 2 doors down came up the walk holding the Gazette and saw it and rang his bike bell in confusion. I opened the door and set the bag on the mat between us. "Take that back to the person who left it," I said. "Tell her we don't accept deliveries." He didn't argue. Kids in this town can read a front page and a closed face. By late afternoon, the sun had moved to the west windows and turned the dust in the study into a galaxy. Lila fell asleep on the couch with her cheek on the hoodie's sleeve. Noah and Mrs. Kim said their goodbyes in the soft voices of people leaving a hospital room at dusk. Ben stood at the sink and washed the only 3 forks we'd dirtied his back, broad and quiet. Samuel checked his list with his fingertip and slid the last page into a fresh manila envelope, then another and another, until there were 3 identical stacks with rubber bands around them. Outside, a car idled, then moved on. Somewhere down the street, a dog lifted his voice and then settled. The Gazette lay under the exhibits, the headline face down. The house breathed the way only a house can when the people inside it have not in fact stopped. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and old paper. A humming exit sign in the corridor threw a weak halo over the security table, and the deputy waved us through like we were stepping onto a ferry that only ever crossed one narrow river from before to after. Ben carried the accordion file. Samuel carried the law in a briefcase that had seen enough hallways to know how the echo worked. I carried nothing so my hands could stay open. Nathan and Amber were already outside courtroom B, dressed for a photograph neither of them would frame. Nathan had that scrubbed look he saves for applications. Amber wore a cardigan the color of fresh cream and sunglasses raised like a headband, as if daylight were a verdict. Beside them, a woman with a hard mouth and a glossier briefcase introduced herself as Tara Lowell. Her handshake was quick and dry. She blinked once at Samuel's name and did not blink again. Inside, Judge Marisol Cortez took the bench with the settled authority of someone who has watched too many families teach the same lesson badly. She had a legal pad, a cup of water, and a pair of reading glasses that she didn't need until she did. "Call the matter," she said, and the clerk did. Tara stood first, because people like Tara always do. "Your Honor," she began, voice pitched to carry without strain, "this is a case about restoration. My clients, Mr. Brooks and Ms. Hayes, seek to reunify with their daughter and manage their late son's estate according to law. We will show a pattern of overreach by the grandmother currently in possession of both child and funds. We will show a campaign of alienation, and we will ask this court to correct a long-running misalignment." Samuel rose when she sat, buttoned his jacket, as if settling a book on a shelf. "Your Honor, this is a case about stability. The record will show 6 years of day-to-day care by Mrs. Brooks, minimal contact by the parents, and a trust document with a discretionary clause, Section 14C, that speaks for itself in plain English. We intend to rely on the words already written, the files already kept, and the people who have been present." Judge Cortez nodded once, a small hinge. "Proceed." Tara called Nathan. He took the stand and found the posture he learned in the 1 year he played JV basketball, shoulders back, eyes soft. He told the court they were regaining footing, that they'd enrolled Lila in a better school, that financial hardship had required a temporary placement with me. He mentioned calls many, he said. He mentioned visits frequent, he said. When Tara asked how he felt about Aiden, Nathan swallowed and let his voice ride the edge of tear without falling. We were rebuilding, he said. Samuel's cross left the story as thin as paint water. He produced phone logs that showed 7 calls in a year, most shorter than it takes to boil an egg. He produced a calendar with 3 visits each annotated in my square hand, Dec 25 2 HRs, March 45 Min, AUG, unannounced. He produced a copy of the Whitfield Elementary enrollment form that listed an apartment whose lease had been terminated 2 months prior. Nathan's jaw flexed. He looked at the jury box, though there was no jury. He looked at the clock, though time here didn't belong to him. Amber went next. Tara led her through a sequence meant to sound maternal lullabies. Birthdays the way Lila says spaghetti. All the things you can recite from the outside. On cross, Samuel handed her a transcript of a voicemail from 2:07 a.m., with the sound of slot machines chiming behind her voice. She said stressed twice and taken out of context 3 times. Samuel called Noah Kim. The boy sat straight and kept his cap in his lap because his mother was in the second row, and Mrs. Kim can anchor a son with a look. He authenticated the video from the lake. He described Aiden's insistence on backups. He explained in a halting, exact way that Aiden had planned to use trust money for college and a scholarship for the river. When Tara suggested the video could be staged, Noah blinked as if she'd asked whether gravity was optional. It's the lake, he said. You can hear the lifeguard whistle. Aiden didn't stage anything in his life. Samuel called Miss Alvarez the science teacher with the tidy bun and the precise vowels. She testified that Aiden had mapped a senior project around dissolved oxygen probes and that he'd asked about sustainable funding for younger students. She handed up an email printout. Ms. Alvarez, could we host a water safety class as part of robotics? Ellie says parents come if you serve coffee. Samuel called Mrs. Henderson, who arrived with her handbag and her posture, and told the truth in the grammar Ashford uses when we fix fences together. Ellie packs lunches, she said. She takes them to the dentist. She sits in the car line when it rains. I have eyes, Your Honor. Tara objected to conclusions. The judge overruled without theatrics. Then Tara called Loretta Hayes, Amber's mother, and I braced for a tidy speech lined up like a row of matching gift bags. Loretta took the stand in a floral blouse that might have been cheerful on another woman. She adjusted the microphone and looked straight at Judge Cortez. My daughter loves attention, she said, voice clear enough to carry to the last row. She does not love follow-through. When those kids were little, she dressed them up for pictures, then dropped them off. The only person who stayed at the pediatrician with the lollipops and the bills was Ellie. Tara's pen stopped moving. Mrs. Hayes, she said, softening her consonants, that contradicts your statement to my office. I changed my mind when I looked at the casket, Loretta replied, and when I remembered who sends me a birthday card every year and who doesn't. No one exhaled until Judge Cortez said noted in a voice that was not praise and not scold, just a line recorded. We broke for lunch. In the hallway, the soda machine buzzed like a wasp in a jar. Ben handed me half a ham sandwich and made me eat it in 4 exact bites. Samuel checked his watch and made 3 calls that sounded like one long instruction delivered to different doors. Nathan found me by the bulletin board with the juror advisements and the faded flyer about a winter coat drive. He stood close enough that I could see the new nicks from a hurried shave. Mom, he said, and the word tried to cash a check it hadn't earned. We can make this end. How I asked, because I know how bargaining works, let the other party say the number. We need 200, he said, just to clear the noise. It's complicated. Some guys from the book place never mind. We drop the appeal on everything. Lila stays. We stop. You get peace. I get time to fix. It's not your time anymore, I said. His eyes went harder. A boy who'd been told no by the right person at the wrong moment. You can't keep all of it, he said, lowering his voice further. You look like a villain when you do. People read the paper. People live on our street, I said. They watch who picks up after a child throws up at 2 a.m. He glanced toward courtroom B, where Amber stood with Tara, her head bent, her sunglasses back in place, as if the hallway were suddenly too bright. You won't help me, he said. And I heard the question below the question. Will you catch me again? I'm helping Lila, I said. That's the job left in the basket. His mouth made the shape of a laugh without the sound. You always pick her. I always pick the child, I said. It used to be you. He looked at my hands like they might lift anyway. When they didn't, he stepped back the way a man steps off a curb in the dark, careful, more surprised than hurt. Fine, he said. Good luck with your judge. Afternoon sank into the courtroom like a second kind of morning. Samuel presented Section 14C with the calm of a man who prefers verbs to adjectives. He handed up the tabbed copy with Walter's underlines and read the sentence that mattered, as if he were reading from a service program, plain, portable, built to be repeated. Tara pressed on natural airs and intent. Samuel held on, expressed wishes and trustee discretion. When he finished, he did not look at me. He looked at the bench the way carpenters check a level and wait for the bubble to settle in the center. "Mrs. Brooks," Judge Cortez said and motioned me forward. The witness chair felt higher than it had for the others, though I know it wasn't. The Bible was cool and smooth. The oath sat simple on my tongue. Samuel asked 3 questions that gave me a plank to walk how long the children had lived with me, who attended to school, and doctor what the arrangement on paper had been. Then he asked the one he had not rehearsed with me, the one that turned my pulse into a metronome. "If the court confirms your discretion under Section 14C, what do you intend to do with Aiden's trust funds?" he asked. Not a speech cue, a steeple of fact. I answered the way I would at a school board meeting when someone asked why the gym needed new lights. "A portion will be secured for Lila's education," I said. "Tuition testing the things kids don't know they'll need yet. A portion will fund a scholarship in Aiden's name for students pursuing river and robotics work, the project he mapped with Ms. Alvarez in mind. And a portion will support community water safety at Cedar Hollow and the county pools. Lessons, equipment, first aid training." I did not look at the parents' table. I looked at the judge's pen and spoke so she could write what she needed. Tara's cross tried for showy. "Mrs. Brooks, have you ever managed a foundation?" "I ran a high school," I said. "Every day is triage and receipts." "Do you plan to exclude the parents from decision-making out of spite?" "I plan to follow the text and the child," I said. Tara smiled a lawyer's smile and ceded the rest. Judge Cortez removed her glasses and let them rest in her palm a moment. She looked at the exhibits at Samuel's stacks at the drive envelopes labeled in his careful hand at me. "I'm taking the matter under advisement," she said. "Counsel will remain available this week." Her gavel made a sound smaller than the wood deserved and somehow more final. We stepped into the corridor together because that is how hallways work. Even when your paths are different, the turn is shared. The exit sign hummed its thin song. Ben reached for the file without asking and carried it the way he had as a boy when Walter handed him the heavier end of a ladder. Outside, February light spread itself across the courthouse steps, cold, level honest about what hour it was. I held the rail not because I needed it, but because rails are there for hands to find. The courtroom felt smaller in the morning. Same wood, same hum of the vents, but the air had the stillness of a page about to be turned. Ben sat behind me with the accordion file against his knee. Samuel's pen lay straight on his legal pad. Nathan and Amber whispered to Tara Lowell, their eyes on the door, as if rulings entered like people. Judge Cortez took the bench and looked first at her notes, then at us. Her voice carried the way a bell does when it isn't trying. On the emergency petition to change custody, she said denied. She turned a page. Temporary guardianship is converted to permanent legal guardianship in favor of Mrs. Brooks. Visitation for the parents shall be monthly and supervised by family services until further order. She did not raise her voice for the next part. She didn't need to. Regarding the trust under Section 14C, the trustee's discretion stands. Petition to redirect funds to the parents is denied. Tara stood as if to speak. The judge lifted a hand and added without theater. Further filings that appear designed to harass rather than resolve will be addressed accordingly. The gavel's tap was light, a fingertip on a tabletop. Papers moved. Someone coughed. I didn't stand right away. Samuel had to touch my sleeve before my legs remembered how to do the small work of walking. Outside, February's sun made the courthouse steps look bleached. The Gazette photographer lifted his camera. Ben stepped between us and nodded him off with a look men reserve for ladders lent and never returned. We went down to the sidewalk together. I did not feel tall or triumphant. I felt located like a tack pushed cleanly into a map. That afternoon, the house breathed differently. Samuel left 3 labeled binders on the sideboard and shook Ben's hand and told Lila, who had stayed home, that her handwriting on the recipe card beside the toaster was exemplary. He did not say goodbye in a way that closed anything. Days slid forward in their ordinary clothes. A week later, the Gazette ran a photo of the community pool. On page 2, lifeguard chairs repainted a coil of new rescue rope, bright as a fresh bruise. Grant received for water safety, the caption read. It didn't mention us. It didn't need to. On a Saturday in March, the gym at Ashford High smelled like varnish and orange slices. Ms. Alvarez taped a paper banner straight, while Noah adjusted a borrowed projector. We handed a certificate with Aiden's name at the top to a girl who wore her hair in a braid, tight as a promise, and talked about river boys like old friends. Lila clapped with everyone else, and then slipped her small hand into mine and kept it there through 3 speeches and a trumpet solo. Ben moved boxes into the carriage house the next week, set a drafting table under the south window, and learned the way our sink knocks when you turn it off too fast. He fixed the screen door without being asked. He taught Lila to cast a line in the backyard with a sinker and no hook. The weight made an honest arc. She whooped when it landed between two dandelions. Nathan texted twice about scheduling the way you text a dentist you don't like. We gave him the Sunday slot family services assigned. He was on time the first visit and late the next. Amber wore sunglasses both days and kept them on indoors. Lila sat at the far end of the table and talked about school and rockets and nothing that could be put in a petition. When the hour was up, she carried her cup to the sink and rinsed it without being told. Spring took its time. The ice at Cedar Hollow went out in a single night, a sound like furniture being dragged across a floor. The county installed a new life ring at the East Dock with a small plaque that said, "In memory of A.R." Ben tightened the bolts because he didn't like the way the bracket wobbled. Lila pressed a star sticker onto her bike frame before she pedaled the path, the sticker catching light each time the wheel turned. On a clear evening that didn't quite feel like April yet, I sat at Walter's desk and wrote a note in my square hand to Mrs. Henderson, thanking her for the French toast bake and the way she stands at the mailbox when the world gets loud. The window was open a thumb's width. From Lila's room, the faint glow of painted stars leaned into the hall. "Good night," she said from her doorway, already in her blue pajamas, hair damp and combed. "Good night, kiddo," I answered. She looked past me at the brass key on the desk, and then at the photograph of Aiden in his science fair blazer. "We're okay," she said, like checking a sum. "We're okay," I said back. In the silence after the house made its good noises, the clock's small insistence, the heat's last sigh, the door easing against its frame. I closed the window that thumb's width, turned off the lamp, and let the dark settle the way dust settles when a room has been well used and will be again. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.